Pension funds around the world have been cut. There are different reasons why this could happen, but most often it's an intentional mismanagement of the finances. This purposely creates a need for more money, then more money, then more. It's a black hole, but with the added bonus of reduced benefits along the way. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today, we're going to look at the pension crisis that is going on right now in Kentucky. I want to extend that to the United States. I want to extend that further to the whole world. I'm then going to switch gears into some other information. So stay tuned, jam-packed episode for you today, beginning with this article out of CBS. Many pension funds for public workers already owe far more in retirement benefits than they have in the bank, and the problem will only grow worse if the economy slows down. And that's what I said here before. That's what the governor of California said, and I will show you some information that goes directly in line with what I have been talking about. The study has been done, and it found New Jersey and Kentucky's public pension funds are in such perilous shape that they risk running dry. Even after 8 years of economic recovery, 8 straight years of stock market gains, the public pension plans are more vulnerable than they have ever been to the next recession. This is an absolute fact. How can you have 8 straight years of growth and yet, you cannot shore up the deficits that are being created? How can you not have growth? How can you have such a disastrous scenario set up for these pension funds when you've had growth since March 2009? Governments have been ramping up the contributions to the funds to help cover the promises that they've made to retirees, but that leaves less money to spend on schools, police, parks, and other core government services. Another option, check this out, all they got to do is reduce pension benefits. A plan to do that in Kentucky led to teacher walkouts earlier this year. That's right. All you need to do is cut from pension funds. Cut from the promises you've made. You're going to get $1,000. No, wait a minute. You're just going to get $700. And there are many people who will deny that this will happen. However, I've shown you many examples here on the channel. I'm going to talk about Kentucky today, but all you need to do is look around and the answers are there for yourself. You don't need to, believe it. You can just read it. At the center of the court dispute is a pension reform bill that aims to shore up the worst funded state's $40 billion shortfall by cutting teachers' benefits and changing the pension plan for new hires. Well, check this out. The reform measure, which they call it reform, was inserted into a sewage bill late in the 2018 legislative session. The bill was then passed the next day without legislative review or public comment. Wow. Don't they always do this, though? They always try and sneak it in when no one's looking. The average person has no idea. They think that everything is done legitimately, but of course, that's not the way it works. And then trying to get it out of there is impossible. It's truly impossible. There are only new regulations added. Rarely ever do you ever take them away. There's more in here, but I'd like to move on here because I don't want it to go on for too long. Here's a chart that shows us the funded ratio. Okay, so you can see that an area like Wisconsin claims to be doing quite well in terms of their funding ratios here. But going down the line, you will see the worst offenders, whether it is Kentucky, New Jersey, and of course, Illinois. Connecticut has its own problems, and you could see all of these. So they are ramping up the contributions. They're bringing in more money now, but still, they can't keep up. We have a big problem. We truly have a big problem. And it's not just areas like New Jersey, Kentucky, Illinois. It's all of them. They all have a problem because they're using fraudulent accounting to acquire these figures. I've shown you this. You can look at my previous videos if you're interested related to pensions. All you got to do is go to a search engine or go to YouTube and type in The Money GPS Pension, and you'll see a whole list of videos. All right. This new pension reform, in which new hires will have to enter a hybrid cash balance plan, which differs from a traditional pension and would limit new sick days that teachers can put toward their retirement. It also wants the state legislators to override the veto of a budget bill and revenue bill. And it's bad news for public education. It goes on into the details, whatever. All I'm trying to explain to you right here is how they are changing these plans, how they are affecting it. Now, as far as I'm concerned, we shouldn't have pensions in the way that we do. I think that the average individual should be responsible for their own actions. But that's really not the way it works. The average person isn't. They don't know what to do, how to invest. They don't know where to put their money. So these funds come in and they basically do it for them. That's the idea anyway. However, what I don't like is that they've made a promise to these people that when you retire, you're going to have this money. This is how much you're going to get. And it's, with inflation and everything, this is how much. And they paint this really rosy picture for people and then they can't pay them later. That's the problem I have. I think the best idea is to pay out the people now and just say, everybody that comes in, we're not going to do anything for you. There's no money left. I think that would be the most wise decision. After, several years, you're going to be able to balance the budgets out again. You're not going to have a burden because where do they get the money from? Well, it always has to come from the taxpayers. The taxpayers are always bailing these out. So I think that's the best thing. I think it's the most honest thing. Just pay out the people who need it now, and over time, basically wean off, and then let them, have to invest on their own. I think that's ultimately the best thing to do. That's my personal opinion. I'm really just trying to cover the news, but I wanted to inject what I think that should be done. If a fund doesn't bring in enough money to cover its promised retirement costs, the state would have to make up the difference. In New Jersey, that would mean spending at least $2 billion more a year to find a shortfall. These findings don't come as a surprise to underscore the need to bolster the state's surplus. It wants to increase the surplus by 50%. There's no possible way that they're going to be able to fill this in because the next recession that comes around, you're going to see everything drop. This is all while we've been growing. March 2009, the stock market hit its bottom. And ever since then, it's been rising and rising and rising. Yet, we still have all this problem. Big problems. After years of Kentucky governors underfunding and mismanaging the pension system, the report confirms that the Governor Bevin's commitment to fully fund the system will provide a stronger financial outlook. That's right. We're going to cut, we're going to change, we're going to dissect, and everyone's going to be worse off, but don't worry about it, simply because we told you so. Now, this is what I wanted to switch gears into. The average person doesn't have any idea what's going on. If you're watching this video, you at least care. You are probably informed. And if you've been watching my channel for a little while, you know what's really going on. I know that you're digging into the information yourself. But take a look at this. It makes me wonder about the extent to which people are naive about the magnitude of the disruption in our world and the level of change that has not only occurred, but is imminent. Is it that people don't see it coming? Or that it's so overwhelming that people are in denial? So this right here is about a little study that they did, asking people, what are you worried about? What are your concerns for the future? If people think that they're going to retire at the age of 65, they've got something else coming. The average person will not be able to. They're extending those numbers. They're making the official retirement age in some places 67, 68. But realistically, a lot of people end up doing this. They work as long as they possibly can. And they don't do so because they want to be working. That's great. You don't want to be sitting at home and doing nothing. You want to be working. But what if you can't? What if you're not well? A lot of people in their older ages, unfortunately, are unable to work. So then we have a big problem, and that is something that I think is absolutely critical. Now, don't worry because the big boys on top, they're going to take care of us, right? Well, this is something that I like to discuss often, and that is the GDP figures. Now, the GDP figures are skewed. They're a scam. I realize that. But one of the things that I like to talk about is the GDP Now estimate. It is consistent that every single time we always see these revised downward. They make a rosy picture, and then they revise them downward. But look at this, 4% growth on the GDP. Does anybody in their right mind believe that there is 4% growth in the GDP? No, absolutely not. Look at this. U.S. economic growth during the early 2018 was slightly softer than initially thought, though a measure of corporate profits partly rebounded in the first quarter of the weekend of 2017. GDP, the dollar value of all goods and services produced in the U.S. adjusted for inflation, rose at 2.2% seasonally adjusted annual rate in the first quarter. And it goes on. They always have to take their numbers and bring them down. They're never going to be 4%. Not going to be that way. They're not going to be 2.2%. The numbers are lower, okay? All right. Some places of the world are very expensive to live in with energy prices, electricity, whether it's your gas or electricity you're paying at home, whether it is your cell phone, your internet, your food prices, your housing, rent, everything else. Well, the Swiss financial hub of Zurich remains the world's most expensive major city, and Egypt's capital Cairo is the cheapest. The annual rankings of 77 metropolitan areas found that Los Angeles features the world's best buying power for the average worker's salary. They're able to afford almost a quarter more than New Yorkers. I found that to be amazing. I know that the real estate there is very expensive. However, I guess a lot of other things there are cheap. If you're from Los Angeles or have been there many times or something, you can certainly share your information, that your inside scoop. But I found that to be quite interesting because I know that the real estate there is quite expensive. Not quite to the degree that we're seeing in Manhattan or San Francisco, but certainly it's not cheap. Perhaps the wages are much higher, and that's how they're factoring that in. All right. There's more details, but I'd like to move on. I just wanted to cover the fact that when you have a pension, when you're making money from that, it is a fixed, your fixed income type of return that you're going to be getting. And so you need to watch where you're living, because you could see there are certain cities that are consistently more and more expensive. Okay, that's the reason I mentioned that. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you click on part 2 of this video. I'm going to get into more details. The link is in the description below. See you there.